Margaret had always believed in the quiet power of love. For 35 years, she and David had built their life together, one careful brick at a time. Their small Thai restaurant in Sacramento had grown from a dream into something real, something that fed not just bodies but souls. David would work the kitchen while Margaret greeted customers, remembering their names, their stories, their favorite dishes. When David passed away 2 years ago, Margaret thought her heart might stop beating altogether. But James, sweet 7-year-old James, kept her going. Every Tuesday and Thursday, she'd pick him up from school, and they'd make spring rolls together, his small hands learning the same movements his grandfather had taught her decades ago. Victoria had always wanted more. Even as a child, she'd looked at their modest life with something close to embarrassment. The law degree, the corporate job, the marriage to Robert with his expensive suits and imported car. These were the things Victoria valued. Margaret had accepted this about her daughter years ago, loved her anyway, hoped that one day Victoria might find the peace that money couldn't buy. The wedding announcement came on a Tuesday. "Mother, Robert and I are renewing our vows," Victoria said over the phone, her voice bright with excitement. "We're thinking the Ritz-Carlton, 500 guests. I've already spoken with a planner about ice sculptures and a live orchestra." Margaret felt something tighten in her chest. "Darling, that sounds beautiful. When were you thinking?" "September." "And Mother," Victoria paused, "we'd love your help with the costs. Robert's firm is going through a restructuring, and we've invested so much in the new house." The number Victoria mentioned made Margaret's hands shake. It was more than the restaurant made in 2 years. It was James's college fund. It was the security she'd spent decades building, the safety net David had worked himself tired to create. "Let me think about it," Margaret said softly. She thought about it for 3 days. She thought about David, who'd gotten up at 4 every morning for 30 years. She thought about her own mother, who'd fled Vietnam with nothing, and taught Margaret that dignity wasn't found in crystal chandeliers. She thought about James and the future he deserved. On Friday, Margaret called Victoria back. "I can't do it, sweetheart," she said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "That money, it's for James's education. It's for emergencies. It's what your father and I built for security, not spectacle." The silence on the other end felt like ice. "I see," Victoria finally said, her words clipped and cold. "I should have known you wouldn't understand. You've never understood what it means to want something better." Victoria. The line went dead. 3 days later, Margaret tried calling. The number was blocked. Her texts turned green, undelivered. She drove to Victoria's house, but the gate stayed closed. The intercom silent. James's Tuesday pickup never came. The school secretary called, confused. "Mrs. Chen," Victoria said her mother wouldn't be collecting James anymore. "She's made other arrangements." Margaret sat in her car in the school parking lot and wept. 2 weeks of silence stretched into 3. Margaret's chest ached with a physical pain that reminded her of losing David. But this was different. David hadn't chosen to leave. Victoria had cut her out deliberately, surgically, using James as the blade. Then the email arrived. Subject: reconciliation dinner. "Mother, I've been thinking. Perhaps I overreacted. Let's talk. Can you come to the house Friday at 7? Just us. Love, Victoria." Margaret's hands trembled as she read it 3 times. Hope, that dangerous, precious thing, bloomed in her chest. She'd apologize, explain, make Victoria understand. They'd find a middle ground. She'd get to see James again, hear his laughter, feel his small arms around her neck. Friday evening, Margaret dressed carefully. She brought James's favorite mochi, homemade, the red bean paste recipe David's mother had taught her. She drove through the Sacramento suburbs as the sun set, painting everything gold. Victoria's house loomed behind its gates, all sharp angles and expensive landscaping. The gate opened automatically. Margaret parked, smoothed her dress, and walked to the front door. It swung open before she could knock, but Victoria wasn't alone. 3 people in dark suits stood in the foyer. The tallest, A woman with severe glasses stepped forward holding a leather folder. Margaret Chen, she asked. Yes, I'm Patricia Morrison, estate attorney. These are my colleagues, Stephen Park and Michelle Rodriguez. Please, come in. Margaret's legs felt unsteady. She looked past them, searching for Victoria. Her daughter stood in the living room, arms crossed, face unreadable. I don't understand, Margaret said. Patricia gestured to the dining room. The table was covered not with dinner, but with documents, official papers, dense with legal language. Mrs. Chen, your daughter has expressed concerns about your ability to manage your financial affairs, Patricia said, her voice professionally neutral. She's prepared a power of attorney agreement that would allow her to make decisions regarding your assets. For your own protection. The room tilted. My, what? Victoria stepped forward, and Margaret saw something in her daughter's eyes she'd never seen before. Something hard and calculating. Mother, you're not getting any younger. The restaurant, your savings. You need someone to help you manage it properly. Someone who understands investment planning. If you sign this, I can help you. I can make sure you're taken care of. Victoria paused, and her voice dropped lower. And if you do, of course, you'll see James again. The unspoken other half hung in the air like smoke. Or you'll never see your grandson grow up. Margaret felt the world narrow to this moment. The mochi in her purse, the lawyers with their expensive pens, her daughter, who she'd carried and fed and loved, using the one person Margaret cherished most as a weapon. She'd read enough. She'd lived enough. She knew what this document meant. I need to make a phone call, Margaret said quietly. Mother, I'll sign. Margaret interrupted, her voice steady. But first, someone wants to say a few words. She pulled out her phone. Her hands were steady now, completely steady, as she dialed. Robert answered on the first ring. Robert, Margaret said, her voice carrying across the silent room. I'm at your house. Victoria and 3 lawyers are here. They want me to sign over power of attorney, and Victoria says if I don't, I'll never see James again. She paused. I thought you should know what your wife is doing. Victoria's face went white. Robert, she said. The phone call lasted 17 minutes. Margaret never forgot a single second. She watched her daughter's expression transform from confidence to confusion to dawning horror as Robert's voice grew louder, audible even from Margaret's phone. The lawyers quietly gathered their documents. Victoria's hands shook as she held the phone. Robert demanded she take. Margaret couldn't hear his exact words, but she heard their tone. Disbelief, fury, disgust. When it ended, Victoria stood frozen, phone dangling from her hand. He's filing for divorce, she whispered. He says he's taking James. He says any judge who hears what I tried to do tonight will grant him full custody. She looked at Margaret, and for the first time in decades, Victoria looked young, lost. He says I'm just like his mother was. Cruel. Margaret should have felt victorious. She felt only tired. You could have just talked to me, Margaret said softly, about money, about help, about whatever you needed. I would have helped you, Victoria, not with a luxury wedding, but with real things, important things. That's what mothers do. You wanted to threaten me with my grandson. You wanted to steal what your father and I built. You wanted. Margaret stopped. I don't know what you wanted. I don't think you do either. She picked up her purse and walked toward the door. Mother, please. Margaret turned. Victoria was crying now, mascara streaking her perfect makeup. I have James every Tuesday and Thursday, Margaret said. Robert called while you were on the phone. He's bringing him to the restaurant next week. And Victoria? She paused at the door. When you figure out what actually matters, when you're ready to be a mother instead of a master manipulator. My door is open, but I won't let you hurt that little boy, or me, not ever again. The drive home felt longer than it was. Margaret's phone rang 3 times before she arrived at her small house. Victoria, calling, calling, calling. Margaret let it ring. Some lessons had to be learned in silence. Tuesday came soft and golden. James burst through the restaurant door at 3:30, his backpack bouncing, his face bright with joy. "Grandma, Dad says I get to stay with you 2 days every week now, forever." Margaret caught him in her arms, breathed in his little boy smell of playground and sunshine. "Forever," she agreed. Robert stood in the doorway, looking older than his 45 years. "Thank you," he said quietly. "I should have. I didn't know she was capable of." "None of us know what we're capable of until we're tested," Margaret said. "Take care of him." "I will." "And Margaret, the divorce papers include a custody arrangement. You're listed as primary guardian if anything happens to me." "I wanted you to know after they left." Margaret stood in her empty restaurant, surrounded by her father-in-law's recipes, her mother's photographs, David's presence in every corner. Her phone buzzed. A text from Victoria. "I'm sorry. I don't know what I was thinking. Can we talk?" Margaret typed slowly. "When you're ready to apologize to James, not just to me, we'll talk. When you've learned that love isn't a bargaining chip. Until then, I'm here, waiting." Like mothers do, she put the phone away and began preparing tomorrow's soup, the way David had taught her, the way she'd teach James. Some recipes couldn't be rushed. Some lessons took time, but love, real love, the kind built on respect and boundaries and honest conversation, that was always worth waiting for. And Margaret Chen had learned, through 35 years of marriage and 2 years of grief and one terrible night with lawyers in her daughter's foyer, that patience was just another word for strength. She would wait, and if Victoria never came, well, Margaret had James. She had the restaurant. She had memories of David and wisdom from her mother and the quiet certainty that she'd done the right thing. Sometimes that was enough. Sometimes it was everything.